My sweet grandchild, I know that the office world has not been exactly what you had hoped. I'm super old now, and I want you to experience life in a way that is most enriching for you. I'll be giving you some land in the valley and hope that you can save it as it saves you. Love, Grandpa. And wow, you have no idea how generous this gift really is. Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Crystal Crown, the show that finds hidden questions you didn't care to ask. And to all my prospective farmers out there, you don't need me to explain Stardew Valley to you. Concerned Ape was mixing up a masterpiece in the Wizard Tower when he came up with this absolute classic. A few months back, I did a Tile Man Challenge farm, one where you have to buy each individual tile before you're allowed to farm or even walk on it. And this new perspective really spiced the game up for me. It made sure you took into account literally every single tile and ensured you were using it optimally. Not that I did that. And it got me thinking, while it's an overgrown mess when you first start out, the Stardew Valley farm is a really great piece of land. Mere minutes walk from downtown, decent public transportation, and multiple options to grow all sorts of new upgrades. Grandpa really had his eye on the future when he bought it all those years ago. Knowing historical numbers, he probably purchased it for 3 gold, a handshake, and some trail mix. But now that it's yours, how valuable would this land be today? Did Grandpa really pawn off some shoddy property that he viewed as a money sink? Or instead, is it enough to make you a millionaire? In short, how much is this farm worth? And as we dive into this question, why don't you reel in the fish by spamming that subscribe button and turning on notifications? Thanks! Okay, so to answer the question of how valuable your farm is, we have to establish a few ground rules. As a baseline, I'm going to be using the standard farm as my average, because I don't really know how a land being infested with bats or slimes is going to affect the total property value. I'd expect that it'd go down, but I can see a world where some goth farmers are really digging it. First off, we need to understand where the land is based off, because it makes a major difference depending on which state or even country we're dealing with. Then, we need to arrive at a reasonable way to figure out how big the actual farm is. This may seem like an easy question at first, but trust me, this turned out to be harder than getting a partner for the flower dance year 1. Finally, we need to understand the legal implications of getting this land. What kind of bureaucratic red tape do we need to wade through to finally accept our inheritance? For the first part of our question, we're getting a lot of help from the name itself, Stardew Valley. Valley isn't some game-specific terminology to make it seem more whimsical. A valley is a very specific set of ecological circumstances. Wikipedia's got us with the official definition. It's an elongated, low area, often running between hills or mountains, that typically contains a river or stream running from one end to the other. There are actually only a few places in the United States with valleys in them, which really narrows our search down. Okay, Tristan, maybe Stardew Valley isn't part of the United States. There are valleys in other parts of the world, you know. Well, I chose the US because of our second clue, the developer himself. Concerned Ape, the original solo developer for Stardew Valley, is a native to Washington State, one of the places in the US to have a valley. Washington State is actually perfect, as they settle a ton of other conditions found within the game. They're not landlocked, so they have access to an ocean. They have one of the nation's tallest mountains behind Alaska, California, and Colorado, and not to mention, they even have their own desert section. I mean, gosh, they might even have junipers in those forests, but it wasn't really in the budget for me to go fly out and investigate myself. But don't take my word for it. After doing this research, my suspicions were confirmed by this local Washington article, which quoted, "I've spent my whole life in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm familiar with the mountains, the forests around here, and I think that was deeply ingrained within me," Barone says. It wasn't conscious, but everything about Washington and the landscape is deeply ingrained into who I am, and so when making the game, it just came out. All this to say, I've decided to go with Washington State as my basis for the property value. And I was in luck, as Washington also has a pretty vibrant farming scene. After looking further into it, I found a large number of farms that focused into different kinds of specialities, from cattle to fruit trees. One article even boasted about the newest apple variant cultivated within Washington's very own orchards, the cosmic apple. Concerned Ape, buddy, I'm just gonna say that based on the name alone, we're gonna need to be able to cultivate a cosmic apple in a future patch. I can just imagine that the taste is out of this world. Hi, this is Tristan from After Writing the Script. So my local grocery store actually started selling cosmic apples after writing this, so I went and tried one of them. Honestly, it's like an 8 out of 10. I was surprised with how much I liked it, and I'm usually a Honeycrisp diehard. So shout out to those Washington farmers out there making gold star produce. I see you. So we have our location. Now let's get down to specifics. What is the acreage of our little slice of heaven? For our first option in determining size, let's start off real simple. So when I said Washington State was a thriving farming scene, I wasn't kidding. I searched up how large the average farm is here, and wow, 432 acres. That's crazy. For reference, that is 327 football fields, or about half the size of Central Park in New York City. Our little farmer is a herbalist, archaeologist, and part-time marathon runner. So that's on the high end of potential answers. Let's look into some more in-game numbers and find some other options. So the basic Stardew farm is made up of about 3.4 thousand tiles. I took the liberty and measured out generally the other dimensions of the farm, so it comes out to be a max of 72 tiles across and 54 tiles tall. From this, we're actually able to estimate a few different ways. Option 1 is to use the height of the farmer. Our crop cultivator is about 6 foot tall according to this Reddit thread, and if we were to say that the farmer takes the length of about 2 tiles, this would put the farm at about 35,000 square feet, or about 0.8 acres. While this amount of land is great for a home and could be found online as a potential plot for suburbia, it's not really the most for a farm. Another option is to use the time system in-game to our advantage. The farmer is walking around for days on end, and if you play like me, just barely getting home before passing out amongst the turnips. If we were to walk the farmer from the top to the bottom of the farm and left to right, it would take him about 15 minutes and 20 minutes to do so. If we were to assume that the average walk speed is 3.5 miles per hour, this would put the farm at a little over 10.2 million square feet, or 235.2 acres. For clarity, that's about 1.5 times the size of Disneyland in California, and about half the size of the country of Monaco, one of the world's smallest countries. Now at this point, we have 3 different size options about how big our farm could potentially be. But how big of a variance would this cause in price? Well, actually, the methods we'd choose here would have a bigger impact to your game than the mayor's underwear making it into the stew. Originally, I looked into the average cost of an acre of land in Washington. However, at a rate of $80.4 thousand per acre, that seemed like way too much. I then looked into the price per acre of farmland in Washington, which is a far more reasonable $3,000 per acre. However, looking into the price, it seems like we overcorrected too strongly. And since there's already a house that exists on the property, I'm gonna have to turn to real-life farmstead estimates to find what I'm looking for. To find our best middle ground, I went to a Washington estate selling website and filtered by farmland to see what was actually being offered right now as the going rate. Considering Washington is a pretty big state, there's a lot of other variances in price through a variety of other factors. This means that one property will cost $700,000, while another one, just 10 acres more, will cost $8.8 million. To flatten out any outliers, I gathered all the farmland within a 100-acre band and averaged them out to find a reasonable middle for Pelican Town to be attached to. For the smallest option, there wasn't really any pieces of land being offered for less than an acre. The closest I was able to get was a 2.26 acre piece of land being sold for $650,000. Using this as my basis, we scaled down the price to get our new estimate, a conservative $230 for our tiny farm plot. With the average home price being about $416,000 today, this little humble plot of land could have been the pick-me-up Grandpa thought you needed to get away from those dang screens all the time. For our second option, places within the 200 to 300 acre range went for about $4.54 million on average, which is quite a jump in price. And finally, our largest option of 400 to 500 acres resulted in an average price of $5 million. It was interesting to find that the jump between 200 to 300 and 400 to 500 acres didn't really result in a major price difference. But this was largely in part to the 400 to 500 acre land having a much higher variance in the prices offered, with some numbers being outlandish, while others being suspiciously low for what you got. Personally, I think they were probably just spooked by the Krobus setting up shop in their sewers. So there we go. Maybe you just want to use the average state size method and choose the most amount of equity possible, right? Well, don't quit that JoJamar job just yet. Remember how I said earlier, we need to understand the legal implications of getting this land. That's right, it's time for everyone's favorite segment, What's That Estate Tax? I may or may not have cultivated some gold wine one night and delved deep into Washington's estate and inheritance tax law. You'd assume that this was a pretty bad way to venture into some dense legalese, but actually they made it pretty simple. When inheriting land from a family member, you're first allowed to deduct any expenses related to the passing of the original owner. From there, you have a taxable land value, of which you're allowed to deduct a little more than $2 million from to find your final estate tax. You heard me right, estate tax, also known by some as the death tax. Let's say you end up going with the Washington state average farm size. This means that you're going to have to fork over a deducted estate tax amount times the marginal rate plus the base tax rate within that bracket. Seeing that the two of our properties are well above the minimum threshold, this means that you're going to owe some serious coin to the Stardew government before you're even allowed to plant that first parsnip. And since you start the game with little money on hand, I doubt that the pencil-pushing job at JojaMart is enough to cover that. If we do all of the adjustments for our potential sizes, these are the total amounts we're actually working with. For our first option, since you're well below the minimum threshold, you're in the clear and won't have to pay a cent for the deed. In the case of our second option, you'll be forking over $592.5 thousand, and in our largest, at a staggering $661.5 thousand, aka 22,000 carp if you were thinking of fishing your way into a home. So now you have a choice. You can decide to take on the big farm, but you'll be saddled with debt that even the community center would scoff at. Our second option gives you a pretty big home, but leaves you with a non-insignificant amount that you need to pay back. Finally, you can take the smallest option, knowing that you'd be free to get started planting on your, albeit much more modest home. There is one good piece of news, however. You don't need to pay the fine immediately. The state of Washington allows its residents a total of 9 months to pay off the estate tax before it starts accruing interest. This means ambitious farmers have 3 whole seasons to pay off their debts before the mayor comes a-knockin' with pitchfork in hand. You better kiss impressing Grandpa's shrine that first year goodbye, because every penny you make is vital in covering the burden he left you. But what happens if you can't pay that back? Does Grandpa's farm get repossessed? Turned into a JojaMart supercenter or the greatest parking lot this side of town? Well, not exactly. Even in cases where you're flat broke to start, there are other ways of paying. From my research online, it seems like you should be able to take out a mortgage on the existing property. If I'm understanding right, you can use this equity to pay off the amount owed, and treat this like a typical home mortgage. It's here I should stress that I'm a YouTuber and not a CPA, so if you know any better, feel free to leave a comment below. And Grandpa, I'm sure you loved your grandkids, but this bill might say otherwise. Tossing our numbers into a basic mortgage calculator, we're looking down at the barrel at payments of $3.6 to $4.2 thousand a month for the middle option, and $4.8 to $5.5 thousand for our top tier. And in case you forgot, you're a farmer, and this bank loan sticks with you for 20 to 30 years. One Purdue study actually looked into the incomes of 400 different farms and found that the average net income was about $127K a year. This means that our smallest loan makes up for 1/3 of your income, with our highest making up more than half. And unless you upcharge those strawberries to a frankly ridiculous, insane degree, I think that this is a level of debt any reasonable farmer is going to shy away from. Despite everything, I keep thinking back to your grandfather. On his deathbed, his only thoughts were of you and how unfulfilled you seemed at work. He hoped that the land he had owned, one of the only things he had left to give, could help enrich your life. So either you have to pick up the tab, stuck with this crazy mortgage until you're his age, or sell the property and all the memories with it. But hey, if the old geezer decided to hire a CPA instead of, sending a handwritten letter, maybe he could have found some ways to shelter this income. Sounds harsh, but look, I'm still saddled with student loan debts, so if you were to put another couple $100,000 on me, I probably would have to give up and join Linus myself. Fish tacos sound pretty nice anyway. Well, thank you for watching Crystal Crown. And if you want to help us form our own little community center, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, here are some others you may enjoy. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to start cultivating my own apple to beat out Cosmic. I'm calling it the Multiversal Apple.